In this video, we are talking about a neuroscience-based 5-step process to develop the #1 skill you need to take control of your life, the skill of behavior design. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Albert Einstein. Our life is the result of the actions we've consistently taken so far. And if you are not where you want to be, the way you reinvent yourself, the way you transform your life is not, of course, doing what you've been doing until now. The problem is that around 40 to 50% of our daily actions are habitual, which means that nearly half of what we do happens automatically without deliberate decision making, which makes it obvious that you can't take control of your life without taking control of your habits. And at the same time, starting with your habits is the fastest way to shape your future, because as John Maxwell said, you don't choose your future, you choose your habits, and they decide your future. Luckily for us, experts have figured out how to develop the ability to dominate our habitual behaviors, and in a way that doesn't rely on willpower. In fact, discipline is actually easy once you understand the science of habits formation, which I broke down into the 5 steps we're covering today. Now, I'm Fran, a certified coach in neuroscience, peak performance, and health optimization. I was trained by the world's leading experts, and in these channels I share tools you can use to take your mind, energy, and productivity to the highest level. Step number 1 is to shift your identity. If you are an ambitious but lazy person, I need you to understand something crucial. And before we even get to that, I know how disappointing it is. I know how awful it feels to know what you need to do to achieve your goals, yet being unable to do it consistently. But believe me when I tell you that your inability to stay consistent is not a character flaw, it is a systems flaw. And once I understood that there wasn't something wrong with me or my discipline per se, and that I simply didn't know how to design my behaviors to become habits, everything changed. And this is the important thing you need to realize, because if you believe your capabilities are limited, nothing that follows will help. It will be a self-fulfilling prophecy. You'll assume your discipline has a ceiling, and as a result, that ceiling will be real. The physical reality will reflect the mental reality. So I want you to stop telling yourself that you are lazy or inconsistent. The fact that you have been being this way doesn't mean that you are this way. And this applies to all negative labels you find yourself saying. You can tell if it's a negative label because it's one that closes possibilities. So every time you catch yourself thinking or saying, I am this way or I'm not this way, in a manner that closes possibilities, shift to I'm being this way or I am not being this way, which is actually the real thing, since the only constant in life is change. With that said, this isn't about manifesting that you are the most disciplined person on the planet and magically that will become real. But what it's about instead is letting your previous identity die. That version of you that doesn't keep their word, that's inconsistent, that's lazy. That version of you disappears in this moment right now. Your new identity is someone who does what they say they are going to do, and who understands that their ability to create and change habits is dynamic, it's not static, and it's something you can develop through practice. Now, to build any identity, your brain needs evidence. So you build this new identity with small daily victories, achievements where you are conscious that you are acting aligned with who you want to be. Say the moment you go to work out when you don't feel like it, you tell yourself, that's like me. And when you don't act the way you wanted to, instead of feeling guilty and disappointed for not being the first perfect human on earth, you simply say, that's not like me, or even something like needs work. You radically accept reality and then commit to following through the next time. Now, once we understand this, we are ready to dive into the science of habits to identify those system failures we mentioned at the beginning, which brings me to step number 2, master the Fogg model. BJ Fogg is one of the world's leading experts in the science of habits, and he discovered that a behavior, both positive and negative, occurs when 3 elements come together: motivation, ability, and a prompt. Motivation is your desire to perform a behavior, ability is your capacity to perform it, and the prompt is the cue or signal or trigger to perform that behavior. And literally in a single graph, BJ Fogg explains how everything works. So if there is a trigger to begin with, we receive the signal to do something. For instance, when you feel cold, you get the prompt to put on warm clothes. And that's when your brain asks itself 2 questions. The motivation question, which is how much do I want to do it? And the ability question, which is how difficult or easy it is to do. If the final result is above the action line, which is the curved line in the graph, then we perform that behavior, and if not, we don't. Depending on how cold you are, the motivation will be higher or lower. And depending on how accessible your warm clothes are, it will be easier or harder to put them on. If you're just a little cold and you have to go get your coat from your car or your room, you probably won't go. Your motivation is low and there is some friction, which increases the difficulty. If you had the coat at hand, you would put it on. Your motivation is low, but friction is low too. Now, if you were very, very cold, you would probably decide to go get the coat from your car or a room. The difficulty would be high, but the motivation would be even higher. The main flaw in our systems is that we design habits that depend on something we can't control fully, which is our motivation. It's fluctuating, it is unpredictable, and often a lack of motivation is what leads us to stop doing things that are good for us and start doing things that aren't good for us in our worst moments, which is when we need our positive habits the most. However, if we're smart when designing habits, we obsess over the two elements we can control, the prompt and the ability. We'll see how to optimize each one in detail. Step number 3, anchor your habit. The fastest way to take control of your habits is by playing with the prompts. When you want to build a new habit, you want to make it obvious, and there are different ways to achieve this. Let's say you want to start running in the morning. You can either set an alarm for 15 minutes before you want to go out. You can also use a visual cue like leaving your workout clothes and shoes next to your bed the night before, or you can also anchor the habit to an existing routine. This is my favorite strategy. Something like after breakfast, I'll go for a run. You have breakfast every day, so that acts as the prompt to then go for a run. The more cues you have and the more obvious they are, the stronger the impact of the trigger will be. Now, just as we want an obvious signal when forming habits, we want a non-existent prompt when breaking them. Fogg actually tells us, no prompt, no habit. So say you want to stop drinking soda. Instead of having them at home and looking at them every time you open the fridge, don't buy anymore and don't keep them inside at home. Or say you want to stop getting distracted with your phone when you are studying or working. Then go ahead and leave it in another room. Don't have it just next to you or in your pocket. This is 100% necessary, but it might not be sufficient. Even if you have a clear prompt and the time to perform an action, if it is difficult to do and you don't really want to do it, you're going to skip it, which is why we still need to work with the ability axis to design habits that don't rely on our motivation. Which brings me to step number 4, design your habit. As we've discussed at the beginning, our main priority for building habits is to create the conditions so we can be consistent. Why? Because consistency is the exponentializer. It's what achieves that compound effect, that exponential line instead of a mere straight line where nothing happens and then everything happens. This is key to understand because habits play the compound effect game. Your physique won't change after one day of training, no matter how intense that day is. But after 6 months of consistent training, after a full year of consistent training, it completely transforms. Your efforts aren't being wasted at the beginning when you don't see results, but rather they are stored and then enhanced. This is why habits are so powerful. All those small daily achievements you've been accumulating over time manifest in incredible results. And our only job is to not stop doing the things that are good for us and not go back to doing what isn't good for us. Now, consistency has a major threat, which is intensity. Wanting to do everything at the highest level is not sustainable. There are 2 issues I would like to cover here. First, you can't implement 100 new habits overnight. Habits take time. You need to have patience, perseverance, and ideally focus on 1 or 2 habits at a time, no more. Second, you need to design your habits for the days when you are least motivated, not most. And we always fall in this trap because when we start a new habit, we have an initial motivation that it's higher to our baseline motivation. So we design it for those levels rather than when we are least motivated. If someone recommends to you meditating for half an hour every day and you've been meditating for 0 minutes and you set the goal to meditate for half an hour, you might do it the first day due to this initial motivation, but it will probably take less than 3 days to give up. This not only sabotages your efforts to build habits, but it makes you see yourself as someone without the discipline to do what you say you are going to do. And this new identity we are striving to build loses power, which makes it even harder to keep your commitments and leads you to start a negative cycle again in which you don't believe in your ability to create habits. The thing that worked the best for me here is establishing a floor goal and a ceiling goal. Personally, I always wanted to establish the meditation habit, and of all of the practices I've been implementing in my life, I would say it was the one that that I struggled the most to install, until I designed it in the following way. My floor goal is to meditate for 1 minute. And the day that I fail, even in that floor goal, my goal is not to fail twice. Meditating for 1 minute becomes my #1 priority for the day ahead. This way, I keep the habit alive. I don't forget about it. This is very important because experts also discovered a phenomenon we could call the 2-day rule. If we fail once, but succeed the next time, the habit stays alive, practically with the same energy. But if we fail twice in a row, that's where the inflection point occurs and the habit tends to die. My ceiling goal is to meditate for 10 minutes. Most times I sit down to meditate, even if just for a minute. But as Newton's first law of motion states, an object in motion tends to stay in motion. So once I've sat down to meditate for that minute, 90% of the time I stay meditating for up to 10 minutes. The day I stopped sacrificing consistency for intensity was the day I managed to take control of my habits. If you made it to this part of the video, you already have all the building blocks you need to build good habits and break bad ones. The only thing you are missing is to just combine them into an action plan, which we'll see in the next and final step: create your plan. Implementation intentions, a concept developed by psychologist Peter Goldwitzer, are a powerful strategy for turning goals into actions by specifying when, where, and how you're going to execute a behavior. Unlike setting vague goals like I'm going to exercise more, implementation intentions follow an if-then statement format. If it is Monday at 7 a.m., then I'm going for a run in the park. Studies consistently support the effectiveness of these implementation intentions in various domains, from exercise and healthy eating to productivity and performance. For example, a study done by Goldwitzer in 1997 found that participants who used if-then planning were 2 to 3 times more likely to achieve their goals compared to those who set general intentions. Research shows that this method significantly increases follow-through by creating strong mental associations between a trigger or cue or prompt and a response, effectively automating the behavior and reducing dependence on willpower or motivation. And if you've been paying attention, you might have already realized that what we need to do here is just to combine a prompt with a behavior in the implementation intention format. If, trigger, then behavior. And we've already optimized both elements, which further increases our chances of creating the habits we want to create. So let's put everything we discuss into practice. Oh, and before we even start with the step-by-step process, note that you'll find a detailed guide with each step in the description so you can have all the information at hand for future reference. What I recommend you to do is to pay attention now to how everything works, and once you finish watching the video, download the guide and take action. The first step is to choose your #1s. When choosing which habits to develop, it's important to combine 3 elements. You want to make the change, not because you feel you have to, but because you really want to. You feel it can have a very positive impact on your life, and in what way, which that is basically the reason why you want to do it. And third, you believe in your capacity to make the change. If it is something you're not sure you can do, reduce the difficulty of the habit to something easier. I've always seen great results working with one habit to create and another to break at a time. For this, you can ask yourself, first, what is the #1 positive behavior that you could start doing, that you want to start doing, and that you believe would have a great impact on your life? Maybe it's working out more consistently, meal planning for the week, working on a personal project at the beginning of the day, etc, etc, etc. And then what is the #1 negative behavior that you could stop doing, that you want to stop doing, and that you believe would have a great impact on your life? Maybe it's putting away your phone an hour before going to bed, or stop using it when you are having dinner with your family, or stop eating ultra-processed foods, etc, etc, etc. Now, it's key that you avoid overthinking this. The important thing isn't finding the perfect habit. The important thing is staying in action and developing the ability to control your habit, which you develop through practice. So that's why you want to choose something and commit for at least a week or 2. The next step is to design the prompts. For your positive habit, you want to develop an obvious prompt. My preferred way of doing this is anchoring the habit to an existing routine. For example, I always brush my teeth when I wake up in the morning. I can use that as an anchor. Something important to emphasize here is that we generally have more control over the beginning and the end of our days than in the middle. Our first hour of the day is more predictable than our #5 of our day. Consider choosing existing routines that are in the first or last hours of the day. For your negative negative habit, you want to develop a non-existent prompt. Highly disciplined and effective people know it's much easier to avoid temptations than to control them. So let's say you want to stop drinking alcohol. Instead of having a bottle or two at home and negotiating with yourself every night of your life to determine if today is the day you allow yourself to have a drink, it would be much more effective to play offense with your willpower and not buy more alcohol, not have it available in your house. Scientists call these pre-commitment strategies Odysseus contracts. I told this story in the video on 7 steps to transform your life, but in case you haven't seen it, in Greek mythology, after Odysseus spends 10 years in the Trojan War, he almost reaches home in Ithaca before being blown off course by the wind. He finally reaches the island of the goddess Kirke, and she tells Odysseus that he will have to pass by the sirens and to be very careful. Odysseus laughs, like how could they possibly harm them? And Kirke tells him their seductive songs have killed countless sailors, and then she advises him to put beeswax in his sailors' ears. Odysseus really wanted to hear the songs, so she advised him instead to have his men tie him to the mast of his ship so he couldn't escape. And this is how you play offense with your willpower. You know you're going to be tempted, so you commit your future self to a specific course of action. Remember, no prompt, no habit. The next step is to design the behavior. To develop a positive habit, you want to design a super easy version of the habit. Let's say I want to start doing push-ups every day. If I choose as a habit to develop doing 100 push-ups every day, that won't work, because on my most motivated days, I might do 100, but we want to design habits that don't depend on our motivation, which is fluctuating, and while we can influence it, it is not something we can control 100%. That can be my ceiling or my standard of excellence goal. But I need a floor goal that allows me to stay consistent on my least motivated days, which could be doing 10 push-ups. To break a negative habit, you want to design your environment to make the habit difficult to do. And you achieve this by adding friction, adding steps between you and the behavior you want to avoid. For example, if you want to reduce your screen time, you can install an app like Opal that blocks distracting apps. To unblock them, you have to wait several seconds, and it's in those seconds where you can exit autopilot mode and make the decision not to enter the app. You could also leave your phone in another room when it's lunch or dinner time, or when you want to study or work in a focused way. If you get the urge to go on your favorite social media app, you don't have the phone so readily available. There is more friction, which allows you to have greater control over the habit you want to destroy. The next step is to create implementation intentions. Once you have the prompt and the behavior, your job is to combine them in an if-then statement. If or after X happens, then I'll do Y. For the positive habit, it could look something like, after brushing my teeth, I'm going to do 10 push-ups. For the negative habits, it could be something that allows you to avoid temptations, like if I go to the supermarket, I won't buy any alcohol, or something that adds friction, like if I sit down to do focused work, I'll leave my phone in another room. The last step is to expect to fail and recommit. Habits are difficult to install, but easy to maintain. However, if you fail twice in a row or more, it will be as if you had never put in the work to build it in the first place. You'll have to reinstall it, which requires more discipline than maintaining it. This is why when you fail at a habit, make it your main priority to follow through with it the next day. This way you keep the habit alive. At the same time, something very important is to expect to fail. Neither you nor I will be the first perfect human beings on earth. The most important days for building habits aren't when you do everything perfectly, but when you bounce back after having failed. Now you have all the tools you need to control your habits, never perfectly, but more and more consistently. Remember, you can find the habit formation guide in the description below, and I don't tend to wrap up with this, but it would mean a lot if you take a look at the channel and subscribe if the content resonates. The truth is that we are just getting started on this channel, and I couldn't be more excited for what's coming. Thank you for your support so early on the journey, and I'll see you in the next one.